So welcome everybody to the webinar on leading your organization for joy, engagement, and teamwork. My name is Robert Murray, and I am the founder of the XJET movement, which is the movement that is designed to help you move from the current model of leadership, whatever it is, whatever state you're in right now, to the new model of leadership where you are working as a level 3 leader and you are able to organize and inspire your team to higher levels of joy, engagement, and teamwork. So probably a little bit of background, which would be important really talking about what is XJET. And I'm going to do a quick screen share real quick. So what is XJET? So XJET is exponentially increasing the levels of joy, engagement, and teamwork within your individual organization. It's really figuring out how to have a co-created aspirational mission where the people in the organization aren't just followers, they aren't just employees, they aren't just people who are doing what you're telling them to do, but they're actually people who are collaborating with you to lead an aspirational mission that they've created, that they care about, that they're bought into. It's about creating a level of change where you and your team feel like you're not just in a transactional relationship, but you're really in a relationship with each other where you are doing something that directly impacts the world, something that you guys both care about, something that you created together, and it's a mission. You could call it a movement in many ways. So before we get into it, I was going to ask a question. Why is this important to you? Why might it be important to you to increase the levels of joy, engagement, and teamwork in your company's organization? So I see right now there's two of you on live, and then obviously a lot of people are going to be watching this in replay. So I'll ask everybody who's on live right now just to share for a second. Why might it be important to you to increase the levels of joy, engagement, and teamwork in your organization?
For me, joy, when there is the presence of joy, it overcomes all the I'm going to call it physical or external challenges that we face day to day. And I'll differentiate that for myself as non-relational.
Okay. Yeah.
All the other things.
Yeah. Like some of the things that come up as like major problems or major obstacles.
Yeah. Or even the day-to-day stuff that just, paperwork or this or that, the monotonous.
Exactly. Yeah. The things that you have to do to make sure that the business runs, which are like the necessary parts of a job, but not necessarily the parts that have to deal with the way that you are interacting with each other.
Yeah. And then that joy allows me to interact with other people better.
Nice. Cool. So Evelyn, are you able to join with audio?
Yes, I am. Hi.
Cool.
Yeah. So why joy? Why is joy important for me in a team? When there's more joy, people have a more positive attitude towards things. So when you have a team that works together and that kind of enjoys what they're doing, and you manage to show them the fun side of things, people just cooperate more. And I think from that side, finding ways to integrate joy in what we're doing is really important.
Nice. I love it. Cool. And I'm sure a lot of people, as they're watching this on replay, will have their own ideas about why this might be important to them. So what's one of the issues that causes this to be super important for just organizations in general. And one of the main reasons is, here's the problem. We're not really that good at this stuff. And if you hear about the Gallup survey that's on employee engagement, and this number varies, but worldwide, right now, only 13% of employees are engaged in the work that they're doing. And just think about the wasted human potential in that. 87% of the world's population, and this goes on the spectrum from they're just disengaged to actively disengaged, you know, and the difference between, and I don't know if you had a chance to read the Gallup poll, but disengaged just means they're checked out. They don't really care that much. Actively disengaged means they're not just checked out, they're actually going around and being destructive. They're taking the effectiveness of some of the people who are engaged in the work that they're doing, or maybe even the people who are disengaged, and they're bringing them down by spreading rumors and talking about things that are negative and making them focus on everything that's wrong and everything that's broken. Just think internationally about the value of, you know, like the gross, the gross, we call it the gross domestic product, but what's the gross world product? And just think about the waste in economic sense of people performing way below their potential. But the bigger issue is, think about the waste of people's happiness, the waste of their effort, the waste of the level of joy that they could be experiencing with each other. It's huge when you think about it. And one of the things that we should probably think about is, we shouldn't be that surprised. If you think about, and I know, Bill, you've probably read some of these things, and I'm sure, Evelyn, you have as well. If you've read a lot of the management books, and even in the business schools right now, so many of the things that we're taught in management theory, in how to run a company, were all based on a book that was written in the 20s called The Principles of Scientific Management, which, when you think back to where we were evolutionary wise in the 1920s, we were training people to work in factories. You know, we were just at the very, very beginning of the industrial area, where we were putting people in schools to teach them conformity. We were there to teach them, this is the way to do this. There was a right and a wrong answer. This is the way to be successful. And what we were training people for is the ability of themselves to work in a factory setting with each other, rather than to be able to really, really interact with each other through inspiring conversations, when using their whole selves, their ability to really really tap into their own creativity, their own inner genius, their own set of skills. And the world has changed dramatically. I mean, if you think about where we are in today's world from the old 1920s factory, we are going through a period of exponential growth. We're going through a period where technology is surpassing, in some ways, our human ability to keep up with it. And so we're at the point where we have to improve the ability for us to guide conversations, to generate ideas, to generate levels of joy and engagement within the organization, so that humans can keep up with the machines, can keep up with all the information that's flowing at us. And really, what is determining the success of a company right now versus the failure of a company has much more to do with, how are we able to collect and harness the genius of the people within the organization? How are we able to generate ideas with each other? How are we able to really help each other to grow and to nurture each other? So let's just ask a question really quickly, and I'll go back to the slides. What if it were true that the oldest human being on Earth was living to about 100 years old, but the average life expectancy of humans was 5 years old. What would you say about our ability to live up to our potential if that were the case? It sounds like an absurd idea, right? That we could have people who can easily live to 100 and yet the average life expectancy is 5. You know, that would be like, what the heck are we doing wrong with that? And that figure sounds insane, you know, when you're thinking about it in terms of human potential or human lifespans, but it's actually the real figure from the success rate of businesses. Businesses on the, you know, some of the oldest businesses have lived to 100 years. Many of them have lived well beyond 100 years right now. But the average lifespan of a business worldwide is 5 years right now. And it would be easy to understand and easy to realize that we're in this very, very, I'll just say we're in this very weird situation right now where we are not optimizing our companies to be successful. And I would really go as far as saying some of the ideas that I'm going to be presenting in this workshop are ideas that if companies don't adopt them, if they don't wake up and realize that we need to do something a little bit differently than the way we're doing them right now, that all of the companies that are relying on that old command and control model, that old model that was based on the principles of scientific management going back to the 20s, they're going to become extinct. And we're actually starting to see that more and more with some of the large companies that are holding on to the old model. They're holding on to the old ways of doing things, and they're finding it increasingly difficult to compete with a lot of the companies that are developing some of the new patterns of interaction with each other. When you think, and I'm going to skip for a second, but when you think about one company that's probably the example of quite a few companies that are doing really, really well, you know, perhaps one of the most successful, highest valuation companies, and really a lot of the companies right now that are doing the best are in the tech arena. And that makes sense because we're switching ourselves more and more over to a technology-based society and a communication-based society. But one of the notable successful companies is Google. And the question is, what did Google learn from its quest to build the perfect team? So they did this study called Project Aristotle, and this was quite a few years back. And in the study, they were measuring what it is that separated successful teams from the unsuccessful teams. And when they did that, they were thinking that they would find out that maybe it had to do with technical ability, maybe it had to do with the level of education, maybe it had to do with the demographic of the people that were in the team. And they were looking, and I think they spent millions, if not billions of dollars trying to do this study. And when everything was said and done, they found out that there were essentially two things that led to the success of a team. So the number one thing was psychological safety. Did the people feel safe on that team to speak up and say what it is that they really thought? Did they feel safe being themselves? Did they feel comfortable interacting with the other members of the team in such a way that they could bring some of their best ideas, their best heart, their best mind, and also receive feedback, give and receive feedback from people? And the second thing that they found out that tended to make them the most successful is that there was inclusion and diversity from everybody. There were multiple ideas. They involved as many diverse ideas as possible and included the whole system. So instead of just saying management is sitting there with all the answers and we're sitting on high and this is the way we do things, they were saying, guess what? we need to get as many ideas from as many people as possible, you know. And Bill, for example, you know, you're working in an automotive repair, you know, arena, and it would be easy to think, okay, you and the leadership team has all the answers, and then expand it to the leadership team and the employees have all the answers. But when you start thinking about what creates a real high performing team, it becomes the leadership team and all the employees and the customers and the community. And when you think about some of the things that have made you the most successful, you'll probably find that you're actually taking and you're constantly monitoring what's happening from all of the people that are involved in the system, and how can you best optimize the ideas and the feedback of each one of those people in order to achieve higher degrees of success. So I'll interrupt for a second and see if either of you guys have any thoughts on what I've shared so far.
Definitely interesting concepts, and like it gets me thinking about some of the stuff that we are doing in businesses and how we interact with each other. In the teams that I have worked in, the most successful ones were the ones where we were, even though we were not on the same level pay band wise, we were all at the same level in the way that our answers and our contributions were regarded. It was not because somebody was at a managerial level that their input that they were bringing into the team was of higher value than somebody else. And like, I've worked in government organizations here in Canada, and for me that was surprising when we did that switch away from the old kind of I'm the boss and you're just an employee point of view to kind of like the 360 evaluation and consideration of everybody's opinion and input on the same level.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, that's so true. You've seen it in action.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you have any thoughts, Bill?
Yeah, well, you know, the number one is good information. I hadn't really ever thought of psychological safety, but inclusion and diversity, certainly the highest performing teams that I've worked with became the highest performing teams because of the inclusion of all the ideas from all the people.
I love it. I love it. Cool. So I will jump back into a couple of interesting models, and we'll take another break for sharing right afterwards. And just to do a quick check-in, is the screen clear enough for you guys?
Yeah.
Okay, because I know it's kind of a graph. Okay, cool. So this is the idea of the new model leading for the future. So it's really just closing out this particular idea, which is, in the old world, we were in the scenario where a very few people had all the answers. So that was the factory-based model, right? Leadership had all the answers. They had a strategic plan. They got to see the numbers. They got to see the outputs of the machinery. They knew everything. And if people needed help, they just went up the scale of hierarchy. You know, they asked their leader, you know, well, okay, what's my next step? And then literally we're functioning as a cog in a machine. And then that person would go up to the next level, go up to the next level, go up to the next level. The new model of leadership is the many people having many questions. And one of the things that I love to share with people is that the best leaders in the world, and I think it was actually one of the leaders of IBM said, the best leaders, the most powerful leaders in the world are not going to be the ones with all the answers. They're going to be the people with the best questions, because questions invite us to think bigger. They invite us to think about, what is it that we care about? What do we want to create together? How can we interact in a more powerful way with each other? And so by asking those questions, it allows people to bring the best of themselves to whatever it is that they're doing, and to create a mission that everybody's bought into because they created it. One of the very, very top principles of leadership that I keep coming back to this over and over again is that people support what they create. And if they haven't created it, when you're in that old model of hierarchical leadership and the command and control model, and you come down with the budget plan, and the leader says, okay, people, 2020, we're going to increase our output by 20%. And then they're told that, and then they're saying, okay, what are you doing to help me to increase my output 20%? Because I already feel like I'm working pretty much as hard as I can. Do we get faster automation? Do we get better systems? Do we get an ability to generate our own ideas? No, you don't. You're just coming up with a 20% increase. And you can imagine what happens in that environment. People are like, whatever, they didn't ask me, it's not happening. But in the new environment where people have the questions, so let's just say instead you ask the question, okay, guys, we would like to get a 20% increase. How might we do that? What are some of the ideas that you have? And that's really the invite and inspire approach. And in that invite and inspire approach, people could be like, well, one of the things that we're noticing is that there's a huge bottleneck over here on this machine. And if we could upgrade this machine, that would increase throughput, probably 10 or 15%. Another thing that we could do is we could change the flow of the factory, and that would improve throughput. Another thing you could do is we notice that we start getting tired at X period in the day. And if we took breaks and could do this, we would probably be able to become more efficient. One of the things that we notice is that some of the people are really good. Some people are already producing at a 20% higher level, and other people are performing at a 20% lower level. Why don't we have the people who are performing at that higher level train some of the people who are performing at that lower level, and maybe that would increase output. So you see, when you're in that scenario where you've invited the team to come up with ideas, and then you as the leader would say, and I'm using a factory example because that's like the old model, but I'm showing how this framework can be used even in that. But you can see in that model where the people came up with their own individual ideas, then the leader could simply say, that's a good idea. Let's see what we can do to make that happen. That's a good idea. Let's form a committee to start doing that. Let's create a training program amongst ourselves and start sharing some of the best ideas. And suddenly they're performing at 20% higher levels. And instead of feeling like this was something handed down from a mountaintop from management, they now feel inspired because it was their ideas. So it's a very, very different approach. So I'll interrupt briefly for any thoughts on that before I move on. And if not, I can jump in. Cool. All right. Well, I will jump in, and feel free at this point to just raise your hand, or Evelyn, unmute yourself, and you can jump in at any time. So I was telling Bill when we were at the prelim of this call, is that literally this stuff is so new. So like, you guys are getting to hear some revolutionary stuff that is so new that it's like literally 4 a.m. Thoughts. So I'm going to just roll with some of the things that woke me up at 4 a.m. this morning, and also caused me, just to be completely transparent, to completely kick apart my entire presentation today, and to show you the new stuff instead. So if anything looks a little bit clunky in the presentation, I'll invite your I'll invite your compassion, because I'm literally pulled this thing together like, oh my God, I'm so excited about this. So the XJET model is moving from a depreciative model of leadership to a level 3 of joy, engagement, and teamwork in your organization. So what do I mean by depreciative leadership? So I already talked a little bit about the command and control model of leadership. So in a way, I'm thinking, if you think about the evolutionary step of leadership, there's level 1, there's level 2, there's level 3, which I'll be describing. Depreciative leadership is like a -1, right? Like you're taking leadership and it's actually holding back the progress of the organization. And what are some of the things that are included in depreciative leadership? So it can be command and control. It could be treating people like machines, but it could also be undervaluing the people. It could be making them feel unappreciated. And one of the ways that that kind of depreciative leadership shows up is by micromanaging, by coming over to your team and saying, why didn't you get that done? I told you to get that done, so that you're yelling at people. It also is focused on everything that's wrong, everything that's broken, everything that's missing in the people. Like you just come out, you never notice anything that they're doing well or right, but you are very quick to point out the flaws. I told you not to do this and you just did this. What's wrong with you? Why aren't you doing this correctly? And it's interesting because now that we're starting to understand human psychology, when you ask somebody a question and focus on what's wrong, what's broken, what's missing, that's what they get really good at, because they're just focused on that. They're focused on the deficit. They're focused on the gap that they have with each other. So what is level 1 leadership? So it's transactional. It's doing your job and getting paid well for it. And there's nothing wrong with that. The vast majority of organizations right now are functioning on the level 1 leadership model. It means that they're doing their job very well. They're providing a good quality service. They're delivering it on time. They're doing it with a level of excellence. It just shows up, right? They're reliable. And some of those companies have become the biggest, most consistent companies in the world. And again, I don't know the behind the scenes part, but I might think McDonald's is, a level 1 type leadership company, because you show up at McDonald's pretty much anywhere in the country. Actually, I've traveled internationally, pretty much anywhere in the world. And what you get is pretty much the same. It comes quickly. It comes reliably. It's at an affordable price. It's fine. It all works. And again, I'm not assigning anything to McDonald's, but it's just the example that came to mind. Do the employees that are working in that environment feel valued? Do they feel challenged? Do they feel enlivened by the work that they're doing? Or do they feel, like cogs in a machine? They're just there. They're doing their jobs. They're doing it well, but their primary goal is to get off from work and then do whatever it is that they want to do for family. It's really the idea of working for a paycheck. And this might be a good time to tell a quick story, which is the story of 3 bricklayers, which is a fable, but it really illustrates the point that I'm talking about here, which is a man came and he walked up to 3 bricklayers that were working side by side with each other. And they were all carefully placing bricks one on top of the other, placing a little bit of cement into each other. And he asked the very first of the bricklayers, what is it that you're doing? And he said, oh, I'm laying bricks. This is my job. This is how I feed my family. This is how I bring home the paycheck and enable my family to have a house. And you're like, makes sense. I like that answer. And then he walked up to the second bricklayer and he said, what is it that you're doing? And the second bricklayer said, I'm laying bricks. This is my career. This is my craft. This is my art. This is the thing that I do where I'm adding value to the world by doing a really good job of building walls and laying bricks. He's like, better answer than the first one, but I like it. Thank you. And then he walked up to the third bricklayer And he said, well, what are you doing? And the third bricklayer said, I'm laying bricks. I am building a cathedral that will eventually be a church that will cause the community to get together, that will bring the people in this community closer to their creator. And you could see in that story that all three of them are doing exactly the same thing. They're all laying bricks. But the third bricklayer had a much bigger vision of why he was doing what he was doing. He had given it thought and really cared about it. And when bricklayer 1 and bricklayer 2 heard the story of bricklayer 3, they probably both thought to themselves, yeah, what he said. You know, they suddenly got a bigger vision of what they were doing and why it mattered than they might have had prior to that. So level 1 leadership, getting back to that, is the first bricklayer. It's McDonald's. It's, I do a job well, I'm consistent, I'm reliable, I deliver a good quality product. So what's level 2 leadership? Level 2 leadership is when you are creating a business together. That's where the team becomes strategic. That's when they feel like they have some level of investment in the business. It's when you guys are thinking about some of the ways that you can optimize systems, and you might hear the people on the team refer to the work that they're doing as their career. It's the number 2 bricklayer in that, going back to that story. They feel a sense of buy-in, they feel a sense of ownership, they feel a sense of progress. And in some ways, you're looking to support the people on the team, they're looking to support you, because it's a supportive, co-creative relationship. So that's really the level 2 of leadership. Level 3 leadership is what I'm referring to as XJET, which is you're creating a movement together. You're creating something that is significant, that makes a difference in the world. And there's lots of examples of that, lots of mission-based companies. But when you think about the companies that attract the very, very best talent to them, they have some bigger mission that's aspirational. They may never even get to that mission, an aspirational mission, but they will attract the very best people who have that shared mission with each other. And then they will be inspiring each other to grow and to help each other achieve that mission. They will be looking for ways that they can scale it. They'll actually become, if you want to use religious terms, they'll become missionaries of the business. You know, they'll start recommending what they're doing to their friends. It's like, hey, this place is awesome to work for. You should try it out. And besides, we're doing something that's really good for the world. So I can think of it, a company that I worked with as an example of that, which is called Organifi, which is a nutritional supplement company down in San Diego. And their mission is to improve the health of the planet by providing supplements that are easy to use and give people the nutrients that they would normally get from eating vegetables and fruits and some healthy things. But we all know that in the way life is configured today, sometimes we don't have time to eat those healthy things. And so it's very convenient to mix your greens in some water and get your greens that way. But they have a bigger mission. It's not the mission of sell as many products as possible. It's not increase sales by this percentage as possible. It's we want to transform the health of the planet. So you can imagine, you know, when you walk in that, and I'm going to show you a couple of pictures of that, like the standard gear, you know, at Organifi, the standard uniform, if you want to call that, is yoga pants and workout gear, right? And you see a lot of people who look like they are super healthy and super fit, because who would be attracted to a mission like that except people who are themselves looking to get as healthy and fit as possible, and want the rest of the world to be as healthy, as fit as possible, and want to help each other become as healthy and fit as possible. So I'm going to jump in and share a couple of stories about Organifi and some of the work that I did with them, because it was really powerful and really, really transformational. So this was an exercise that I did with them called the Superpowers exercise. And you could see, and these were pictures that, like, as I was having them go through the exercise, somebody just snapped these pictures in real time. So these are not staged pictures. Like, this is what was really going on at the time at the event when we were doing that. And you could see the joy on people's faces and the interaction patterns that they had with each other. In this slide, you can see Lisa here, and I may have to enlarge this briefly so you can kind of get the sense of it. No, well, that doesn't work at all. But if you see Lisa, who is the HR director by normal company standards, but she calls herself the people engagement. I'll have to, I'm not sure if I have the term right, but the chief people officer. So she's really all about people and engagement. That's really what she's focused on. So she was pulling out a tissue to hand to somebody, because invariably, whenever I've done this exercise with anybody, it brings tears to their eyes and a level of connection that you've just never seen in any other situation. And just to walk people through what that exercise was, you could see the question that's on the screen. Think about a specific story or a moment when you have witnessed each one of your team members being at their best and doing something that they love. It could be a time that they were example to others or an inspiration to you, a time that they were excited or motivated about their work, and they were coming alive in a specific way. So when you think about the story, write the story about that person, and then capture a couple of key points. What are the strengths that you see in them that you're inspired to share with them? And what you see happening in this particular exercise here, and I'll see if I can enlarge this. This may work. Yeah, okay, that works better. And you guys can thumbs up. Evelyn, is the screen readable? Like, you kind of get the sense of the picture of what's going on here?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. Cool. So what's going on here is that people have written the story. So what we did is we had people break into groups of 6, and we had them write the stories for all the people, all the other 5 people, and then they write the stories for themselves. And then one after another, they got up into groups with each other and they shared the story. So one person would stand by the whiteboard. So if you go back to the slide where Lisa was, like in this particular case, Lisa was the person who was getting her story shared. I apologize about the text. Oh, wait, I think I know how to do this. Bring picture to front. That totally didn't work. Told you I was inventing this slide deck literally moments before we got on. So what you could see is the person was standing in the room, and everyone, one after the other, would explain to this person the story of when they saw this person at their best. Hence the tears, because suddenly in that moment, all of the other people, like the person who was receiving that feedback, suddenly felt heard, acknowledged, understood in a way that they never would before by their team members. The other thing that it did is it made people aware of superpowers that maybe they weren't even aware of or weren't quite as powerful in themselves. And how might they be able to utilize those superpowers coming forward? And this was transformational. And then what they were doing is each person would write the few comments on the Post-it note. They'd stick them up and then move on to the next one, on to the next one, on to the next one. And then from that, because the person had also written their own superpowers, they got to choose the particular superpower that they wanted to most utilize and rely and depend on going forward from that moment onward. So hopefully that that makes sense. But you could see how unbelievably transformational something like that could be to an organization. The level of teamwork, like I went in and I talked to the people at Organifi the day before, and some of the feedback I got is, oh my gosh, teamwork is through the roof. One of the things that we're doing, so going back to Lisa, she realized how much, even though she was doing some of the nuts and bolts, the technical parts of HR, she realized that she loved coaching. And so she decided in that moment when she received the feedback about how good she was as a coach and a mentor, she decided to start an internal coaching program within the company so that she had a certain number of hours scheduled for people every single day where they could walk into her office and get the help and the coaching and the mentorship that she wants. And her level of happiness went up through the roof, because you can imagine now the thing that she was the best at and that she loved to do, she was being able to tailor her job to do more of that and less of the things that didn't give her energy, which were, filling out forms and checking reviews and timesheets and paperwork and all that kind of thing. So that was a really powerful example of an exercise that we did. But when you think about Organifi, they are that level 3 type of organization. They're the kind of company that has almost 0% turnover in the millennial population. If you look here at the picture of the team, and this was right afterwards, and you could see what we did is, I'm just going to totally kick apart the the slides real quick. If you look at the wall behind us, we had everybody post their superpowers on the wall behind, and you could see everybody was like, this is the best thing ever. And you can see that the people in this group are, they're all 20 something. They're all millennials. They have almost 0% turnover in the millennial population. That is rare. Very, very, very rare. And that's why I made the comment earlier when we were talking that in many ways, I think the companies that don't adopt these principles are going to become extinct. Because you think about some of the traditional companies right now, they're losing people right and left. And the millennial population, they have a reputation for jumping, because if they don't feel aligned with the mission of a company, if they don't feel like you care, if they don't feel like they have the chance for growth and mentorship, they're gone. We're right now at a time where, at least in the United States, we're almost at full employment. I hear from almost every client that I work with that it's hard to attract the very best talent and the very best minds. How can you do that? How can you increase retention? How can you increase the ability to attract the very best people? It's by having that aspirational mission that people are excited to. It's about creating the environment where they felt safe, where they felt heard, where they feel honored and appreciated in the work that they're doing. And you can develop a situation where, in this case, with Organifi, almost all the people that join them are referrals from friends. They're like, you got to come work here. This place is really fun. We have a great time together. You should join this. And then it feels like a family. They feel like they're really connected to each other in a powerful way. So let me give you an example about something else that was just the opposite of that. This was a high tension team. I'm not going to use names for obvious reasons, but this was a high tension team. And I was invited into the organization because we had a situation where management literally had not talked to some of the people on the employee base for 6 months because of the level of tension that occurred. And using some of these principles about focusing on what's working, what are our strengths, what is it that we care about together, I created a situation where by the end of the day, there were tears, people were hugging each other, they were laughing together, they were working together, they were designing together, and they had really created a cadence of healing or a rhythm of healing that couldn't have been possible doing it any other way and any other approach. So what you see here is really significant. And again, same thing, you know, this is just snapping pictures that were happening in real time. But these two people, one's an employee, this guy, one's on the leadership team, they hated each other going into this session. And we're doing something here called paired interviews, where we're walking people through what are my strengths? What is it that I care about? When have I been at my best? What is it that I appreciate in my life? And what do I want my future to look like? And as they started sharing with each other on those topics, they realized they had far more in common than they possibly could have imagined. They started laughing, as you can see. I mean, they're both like enjoying each other. They were hugging each other at the end of this event. And they said, I never knew what this person's heart was until we did this exercise. And after we did this exercise, I saw the person's heart and I realized that they're really not such a bad person after all. And they have been able to communicate and connect with each other in a powerful way since then. And that never would have been able to happen had they been focusing on everything that's wrong, everything that's broken, everything that's missing. And in this bottom picture, you see the team designing together. We said, what is it that you most want to create? And they said that the things that they most want to create is, number one, unity versus division. Because what they had before was division. What they wanted was to create unity. And they were literally designing how they could do that. And then the second thing that they were looking for, which we had a whole separate team design, we broke into two groups as a collective, was how people weren't taking advantage of the training that was being made available to them. And so we asked the question, how can we make our training so fun and so engaging that nobody would want to miss it? And so they were designing together the ideas about how they could create that type of an engagement with each other. And by the end of the day, they had some brilliant ideas that are going to lead to innovations that they would never have been able to get before. So I'm going to interrupt at that point and see if you guys have any questions before I continue on.
Nope, no questions. Good,
Great.
good material.
Nice. Cool.
No questions.
All right. So I'm just going to jump into two more things and give you some, because I know this can be like drinking from a fire hose. So the difference that we're focusing on, and so some of the things that are behind the scenes that you see at work here is thinking about the power of the frame. And I'll go back to screen sharing mode. Normally what people do in a situation is they're always focusing on what's wrong, what's broken, what's missing, how do we fix the problems? And they're not focused on what is it that we really want? What do we want to create together? So fixing problems, you ask yourself, again, thinking about the power of questions to direct the mind. What's wrong? What's broken? What's missing? Whose fault is it? How bad is it? Who do we blame? So what they get good at is they start studying all the things that are going wrong and they don't fix the like the very best they can do looking at those things is to go back to a neutral situation. The classic example of this is British Airways, who invited a bunch of facilitators using this particular framework to help them with their lost baggage problem. And so when they did that, they brought in these facilitators, and the facilitators said, you know, is what you really want fixing your lost baggage problem? Because if we do this, you're going to get really good at finding out all the factors that create lost baggage, and you may be able to reduce the amount of lost baggage. But are you missing an opportunity for growth here? And they're like, what do you mean? It's like, well, what do you really want? And they're like, well, what we really want is we really want our customers to have an exceptional arrival experience. And so then they said, great, let's design around that. How can we create an exceptional arrival experience for our customers? And so when they started focusing on what was possible, the abundance gap, what does excellence look like in that situation? They started coming up with a whole bunch of ideas that, yes, fixed the lost baggage problem, but then on top of that also fixed how do we communicate with our customers when something goes wrong? Doesn't have to be lost baggage, but how do we communicate with them, period, when anything goes wrong? How do we handle problems? How do we respond to it? How do we create a great in-flight experience? How do we create a real great experience when they arrive at the destination airport? How can we communicate with them in such a way where they feel like we really care about them as a company? So you can see in the old framework where they're just focusing on fixing lost baggage, at very best, and usually not even then, at very best, all they can do is fix the problem. But when they start focusing on the abundance gap, what's possible for them instead, they can create a much, much bigger picture for themselves of what can be done and how they can move themselves powerfully into the future. So one of the things that we share, and I'm actually going to go to a slightly different slide. And this is using a framework called appreciative inquiry, and it's the appreciative inquiry 5D cycle. And I'm just going to briefly describe what this is, because this is really at the heart of a lot of the work that I'm doing, which is the definition. So going back to the British Airways story, it's really thinking about what it is that you care about, what are the goals, and creating a common goal that really matters to everybody. So British Airways story, fix lost baggage, not inspiring definition. British Airways story, creating an exceptional arrival experience, a much more inspiring version. And then it goes into discovery. What gives us life? What's the best of what is? So typically in that situation, and I'll go back to the example of the company that had a significant amount of tension between the management and the team, before I even asked anything about, okay, great, how do we start creating unity? How do we solve the problem of people hating each other? I asked the question, what are we already doing that's really working well? Where are we at our best? What are some of the strengths that we have in our organization that we want to keep and want to build on? How can we get more of those things? And how might we even be able to leverage the strengths that we have currently to overcome some of the weaknesses that we may be facing in terms of the tension that we have? So the next step of that is to dream. I'll go back to the slides. What might be? What is it that we really want to create together? You know, in this case, they came up with the idea of unity. We really want to create a situation of unity with each other. And then we went into the design mode. How might we do that? And as they were doing that, they came up with all kinds of innovative ideas. Some of the ones that I could think of, you know, coming off the top of my head were that they could establish a rhythm of healing in the meetings that they had with each other. So that rather than just jumping into the meeting and saying, okay, guys, how do we do with our numbers today? What were some of the problems that came up? That's the typical way meetings are taking place. They said, well, what if instead we said, hey, let's share something that was a win this last week with each other. What was something that we really were inspired by? What's something that we're excited to carry into the future? So starting to share what's working with each other. And they're like, yeah, that would make our meetings a lot more fun and a lot more inspiring. And it would get us the opportunity to know each other. So that's one idea they came up with. Potlucks was a huge, a huge hit with this particular group. They thought it would be great if they had something that was outside of the realm of the office environment that they were in. And what if they started creating social situations with each other? So they came up with the idea of let's have a potluck with each other, and then we can do things just to kind of build that family feeling with each other. So those are some of the examples of some of the things that companies can come up with in the design phase. And then the final is deliver. How can we implement these things by taking action? So super simple example with the meetings. Let's just start changing up our meetings. Let's do it now. So they can implement that really quickly. Potlucks. When are we going to do our first potluck? And they created a powerful rhythm of healing with each other in that particular environment. Cool. I will stop my share and see if you guys have any particular questions.
No questions here.
Cool. You good, Evelyn?
Yeah, no, Rob, this is really neat. This is a really different perspective and gives me great ideas of how to approach things. Even within the teams that I am working with, there's definitely ways we can do things better and a really fresh way to look at it. Thanks, Rob. I appreciate this.
Yeah, absolutely. What were some of the things that you loved most about some of the frameworks, like something that you might be able to take into and implement within your own team, even from just the tiny little bit that you learned?
Especially what are we doing already, what works, right? In a lot of team meetings, when we start out, we focus a lot on the issues and the problems because that's what is top of mind. But if we get them to shift the thinking, that we kind of like the gratitude practices, right? That we teach when we teach shifting mindset. Instead of focusing on your problem, focus on what you're already grateful for. Or when we implement something like that in a team atmosphere, it's like, okay, so what is it that we really did well this week? We right away, it starts the meeting off in a completely different tone. And I think that will create more an aspect of collaboration than division, because inadvertently, when you're talking about problem, even though you might not say it that way, but there is an aspect of, okay, whose fault is it? And when you're a team, whose fault it is, it doesn't ever matter. It doesn't. It matters that we find a solution to it and what can we learn and how can we move forward. And yeah, I really like that. And I am going to implement that in some of the meetings that I'm having with team members.
Nice, nice, cool. Thank you for sharing that. That was really inspiring. Bill, were there any major takeaways, things that you loved about this, or things that you saw you could implement with your team right off the bat?
Yes, and a question. So the power of the frame, the deficit gap versus the abundance gap. I see how the deficit gap is something that happens from moment to moment with problem solving.
Mm-hmm.
And so every meeting could easily revolve around what's wrong, how did we get here, whose fault is it, how bad is it, how do we fix it? The strengths-based frame, is that something that you can use in every meeting? It almost seems like so long-term that maybe, I don't know, what do we want? What is working? What does excellence look like? How do you revisit that week in and week out, say, assuming you have weekly meetings?
Yeah. So the simple way to do that is just it's partly a training thing. So like if you were to focus on the strengths, just once a quarter, once a year, have some regular check-ins to kind of remind people of that. And then it becomes the process of you living the idea of reframing. So as you're focusing on what's wrong, because the problems are going to come up. First of all, There's nothing wrong with that. That's the way our brains are trained. We're trained to look for danger. That's one of the things that help humans survive. We'd be alert for the thing that was going to eat us, or the thing that was going to kill us, or the thing that was going to cause us to starve to death or poison us, right? Like, that's the way, we evolved. And, we have succeeded and thrived as a species by focusing on what's wrong and broken and missing and or dangerous for us. So the next evolutionary step is training our minds that when we are become aware of those problems, those things that are wrong, to immediately reframe to what's the opposite of that, and then what do we want instead? What is it that we're really trying to create instead? So going back to the British Airways story, and if you want, actually, why don't you just bring up a real example and we'll do it in real time with a problem that somebody brought to you in the last week or so.
Gosh, my problems this week came from customers, not from staff. So I'm not sure how that would work. Okay. So a real staff problem was one of my guys was gone. He was out sick 4 days last week, and his paycheck really hurt because of
it. Yep. Cool. So when you're in the reframe, like he may be, so was he coming to you and saying that was unfair, or, like, I'm just unhappy about that? I mean, he probably expected that, right?
Yeah. He wasn't asking, what he was asking for was, I guess he came with a solution to a problem. So again, it's kind of a tough one, but he wanted part of his rate of pay is based on how much work is done, not just how often he's here. So it's an incentive-based pay. And he said, I got like 10 hours of work done the one day I was here, but I didn't get 50 hours done this week because I was only here one day. But I'd like to get my highest level of rate for that one day versus, the average of the 5 days. And so what he was asking for was, ultimately, he said, I've been here for 5 years. I would like to have 5 days of excused absences, which would basically allow him to have that 120% productivity number that he was looking for, if that makes sense.
Yep, exactly. Cool. So yeah, what you do in that particular situation, and you can't always say yes to everything, right? And I won't even ask what you did in that situation unless you care to share it. But what you do is you just get people into the mode of problem solving, where you guys are working together, so he's coming to you, he wants something that, like, you have a current system, that gives him X rate of pay. What he wants is a different system. He wants to create a different system. And the thing that you want to create together is, what? I really do value the employees, and I would love to create a system that makes the employees feel valued and cared for. So yes, I definitely, I'm very interested in that. That's the reframe. It's the what's wrong, what's fixed, what's the positive opposite. Yes, I would like to create a system so that we can do something that makes people feel valued and cared for. So let's put that on the agenda. How can we create this? And it'll be something that I do with all of you. And then you could simply say, and again, I don't know what you did, but you could simply say, I'm sure you understand that with the existing system, it's difficult to make, individual exceptions for people. However, I am totally open to revising the system in accord with what everybody, comes up with and what these ideas are. So it's not just going to be me sitting in an office coming up with the next level of incentive program, but we'll actually have, we'll put on the calendar for the next time we have a group meeting or a summit or anything else, we will put on the calendar, devising an incentive program that makes everyone feel good about what's going on. So I'm totally listening. So it's like sometimes you can't address every problem in real time immediately, but them knowing that their voice was heard, it was valued, the information was received, and they'll have input into what gets created instead is like, great, I understand where you're coming from. I'm fair.
Yeah, and for him, he's one of these guys that is probably the first to be the victim and the first to be the one to say things like, it doesn't matter what I say or think anyway. So for him to come in with a problem and a solution, I didn't answer him right away, but I did tell him that this Monday I will be rolling out the new excused absence program.
Sweet. You did
one
listen.
Day per year. What's that?
So you did listen to him and he did feel heard.
Yeah, 1 day per year for the first 5 years you're here. So,
nice.
Yeah, so it'll be good. And the other problem he had was he goes, I don't want anybody to know that I was complaining about this. So I said, I'll roll it out as my idea.
Yeah.
Which is just so funny because I usually as long as I remember where the idea came from, I always give credit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you could say, I'm glad to protect your identity if you'd like, but, and then again, this is going for the, what do we really want to create together? Wouldn't you love the environment in our office to be what it actually is, which is I have an open door policy where I am listening to the feedback of the employees. And if they have good ideas, I want them to generate. So it's not just your good idea in this time, but I'd love you to generate more good ideas. And I'd love all the other employees to feel free to generate their own good ideas. So don't you want to take credit for kicking off this movement? And he's like, oh, I didn't think about it that way, but you're right. I just kicked off a positive change that helps everybody. So yeah, give me credit for that.
I'll give it a shot. See what he says.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting, it'll be a very interesting thing. Evelyn, did you have any questions that you would like to ask about everything that I shared? Or anything?
No, I'm good. Just have a lot of background noise at the moment here.
Okay, good. Well, I'll let you stay on mute to honor everybody that is potentially going to be listening to the replay of this presentation. So cool. So the final thing, just to share a little bit about what I do and how you can get either this replay or have more deep discussions with me about bringing some of this work into your organization. And it goes deeper. I mean, like if you look at the slide presentation, I've probably got 60 more slides that would take far more than an hour or an hour and a half to share with all of you. But if you would like to get in touch with me or have a brief complimentary session, so I will jump on the phone with you, talk about your specific situation, what it is that you're looking to create. You can send an email to me at rob@getxjet.com. So you can see my email right here, rob@getxjet.com. You can connect with me on LinkedIn and or Facebook, although I have to admit that I am trying to ignore Facebook because A, it's a rabbit hole, and B, I have almost filled up my 5,000 contacts on Facebook. So, so I'm at the point now where I'm going to have to actually go back through and like unfriend some people if I start getting a million Facebook requests, but whatever platform works for you. But what I would suggest is if you're interested in learning a little bit more about what you can do to increase the level of engagement in your organization, if you can take some of this work into it, I would be more than happy to jump on the phone just to understand what your situation is. And I would just suggest sending an email at rob@getxjet.com. And I really appreciate all of you guys showing up for this masterclass. I'm sure we will be doing lots more of them. As I said, this is evolving very, very, very quickly. The XJet movement in itself is in infancy stage. And when I realized the potential of this to really transform the levels of happiness within organizations, the levels of engagement in organizations, I don't know about you guys, but I know that for me, there's deep meaning in the work. I was looking through some of the pictures that I might be able to share on the slide, and I found myself tearing up because I realized that just in the clunky versions of the exercises that I had done even a year or two ago, and now some of the far better versions that I've been doing the last 6 months to 8 months, just the level of impact I had, it just really hit me how many lives can be changed. Because if you think about the work that you're doing and what you're doing for your organization, it's not just you making your employees happier. It's not just about you making your employees and your customers happier. It's about the people on your team going back, and instead of taking things out on their wife and their kids or the people in their schools or their churches or wherever other organization they're part of, now you're generating happy people who can then be going home to happy families and going home to happy communities. And it really has this powerful ripple effect, this upward spiral that's so important and so healing and so needed in the world today. So if you have any interest in this at all, I really just invite you to shoot an email to rob@getxjet.com. We'll get you booked for a complimentary session, talk about what you need and how I might be able to support you. So thanks again, everybody.
Thanks, Rob.
All right. Have a good one. Sure.
See ya.